Level 1. $6.47. You're standing at the counter under fluorescent light that makes everyone look tired. The menu board glows above a teenager who hasn't looked at you yet. You order the same thing you always order. He repeats it back, wrong. You correct him. He doesn't apologize, he just fixes the screen and moves on. The receipt prints before you've even reached for your wallet. Nobody asks how your day is going. Nobody remembers you from last week, even though you were here last week. You are a number in a queue, a transaction between the person in front of you and the person behind you. Your food arrives in a bag, not on a plate. You eat it in your car with the radio on, because the dining room smells like bleach and regret. The fries are hot, the rest is forgettable. The napkins are too thin, and the straw doesn't fit the lid right, and you notice both without saying anything, because saying something at this price feels like complaining about the weather. You don't complain. $6 doesn't buy complaints, it buys calories and forward motion. Nobody at this counter is unkind to you, they're just not thinking about you at all. You watch the next car pull up before you've even pulled out of the lot, and you understand, without anyone saying it, that you were never the point of this transaction. The food was. The first rule: at $6.47, you're not a guest, you're a unit moving through a system built for speed, not for you.
Level 2. $19. A hostess seats you at a booth with a laminated menu and a TV playing a game nobody's watching. Your server introduces herself by name, which feels like an upgrade until you realize she says it to every table. She takes your order on a small pad, refills your soda without being asked, checks in once during the meal, once after. It's service, technically. It's also a script. You could be anyone. You could be no one. The bread basket arrives because it always arrives, not because someone noticed you were hungry. You tip the standard amount and she thanks you the standard way. The manager walks the floor once, scanning tables the way a lifeguard scans a pool. Present, but not personal. Nothing here is wrong. Nothing here is memorable either. You leave full, not moved. On the drive home, you try to remember her name and can't, and you suspect she couldn't remember yours either 5 minutes after you walked out the door. The second rule. At $19, you get attention. You don't get recognition. Those are not the same thing, and you're starting to feel the difference.
Level 3. $52. The lighting changes first. Warmer, lower, intentional. Your server doesn't just take the order, she describes the special like it matters, like she tasted it herself this morning. She asks how you'd like your steak, then asks again when it arrives, just to confirm. Small check-ins that feel less like protocol and more like care. The bread here isn't a basket, it's a single warm roll placed like a decision. You order a second glass of wine, and she brings it without you flagging her down, setting it down at the exact moment your first glass empties. A small piece of timing that feels almost accidental until you realize it wasn't. You start to notice the room noticing you back. Not loudly, just enough. The manager walks past and nods the way you nod at someone you might remember next time. A couple at the next table laughs too loud, and nobody rushes to quiet them, because tonight, the room belongs to whoever's sitting in it. You leave a better tip than usual, because something about tonight felt earned instead of assumed. The third rule. At $52, the restaurant starts performing for you instead of just processing you. The performance is still generic, but it's aimed in your direction. Level 4. $95. You've been here twice before, and the host says your name before he says his, not because you're famous, because someone wrote it down. Your server knows you skipped the onions, remembers without asking. The kitchen adjusts the sauce slightly heavier on the reduction because you mentioned once that you liked it that way. These aren't big gestures, they're small enough to almost miss, which is exactly why they land. The sommelier comes by, unprompted, suggests a pairing that costs $12 more than you plan to spend, and you say yes because the suggestion felt like a gift, not a sales pitch. You linger over dessert. Nobody rushes you toward the door. A server clears a plate and asks genuinely if the portion was enough, not as a formality, but like the answer might change something in the kitchen tomorrow. The check comes on a small tray, folded, unhurried. You realize you've stopped checking the total before you look at it. The fourth rule: at $95, the restaurant remembers you. And being remembered is the first thing money can't buy at a drive-through window. Level 5, $180. The reservation line has a person, not a bot. She asks if this is a special occasion, and when you say no, just dinner, she still notes something in the system that changes how tonight unfolds. The maitre d' greets you like you've arrived somewhere, not just walked in. Your coat is taken before you think to remove it. Water is poured tableside from a bottle you didn't choose, but somehow matches your meal. Courses arrive paced to your conversation, not to the kitchen's convenience. A dish appears you didn't order, compliments of the chef, because the server mentioned you seemed like you'd enjoy something adventurous. You did. Halfway through, you realize nobody has checked on you unnecessarily, and nobody has left you waiting either. A rhythm so precise, it feels less like service and more like choreography built specifically around your table. The bill, when it comes, isn't presented. It's discussed, quietly, almost apologetically, as though money is slightly beneath the evening you just had. The fifth rule: at $180, service stops reacting to you and starts anticipating you. The gap between those two things is the entire luxury industry. Level 6, $340. The tasting menu has no prices next to the courses, just names. Poetic, unhurried. 9 courses, each one explained by the server like a small story with a beginning and an end. The chef steps out once briefly to ask if the fish was seasoned the way you like it and waits for your actual answer instead of a polite one. You realize the kitchen has been adjusting in real time based on your reactions. More acid here, less salt there, tailoring a meal that technically didn't exist as a fixed thing until you sat down. The wine pairing isn't a menu item, it's a conversation. The sommelier asking what you drank last month before deciding what you'll drink tonight. A server notices you lean forward slightly during one course, watching your face rather than your plate, and quietly plates a second, smaller version of it near the end of the meal, unasked, unbilled, unexplained. Time slows in a way that feels expensive even before the check does. Nobody mentions the total out loud. It appears in a leather folder, already itemized, already understood to be secondary to what just happened. The sixth rule: at $340, the meal is built around you instead of assigned to you. Level 7, $650. There is no printed menu at all. The chef sends courses based on what arrived at the market that morning and what he remembers you liking from your last visit 8 months ago. You didn't remind him, he remembered on his own. Or more precisely, his system did, and he treated that memory like it mattered. The dining room seats 20 maximum, and every server knows every guest's name without checking a list. A dish is quietly removed from another table's order because you mentioned once in passing that you don't eat shellfish. And somehow, that note traveled to a kitchen you've never spoken to directly. Midway through the meal, the chef walks the room once. Not performing, just checking, the way someone checks on family rather than customers. The bill, when it finally exists, is never shown at the table. It's handled elsewhere, invisibly. Like discussing money in the room would break whatever spell just occurred over 3 hours. You don't feel like a customer anymore. You feel like an occasion. The 7th rule. At $650, the restaurant stops selling you food and starts building an experience shaped entirely around the fact that you exist.
Level 8. No number at all. A private chef. A table for 2 in a room that isn't technically a restaurant. No menu, no other guests, no receipt handed to you at any point in the evening. The chef designs the meal around a conversation you had with his assistant a week earlier about your allergies, your favorite childhood dish, the anniversary you're celebrating. Every course arrives with context, a sentence about why it exists for you specifically. Somewhere around the 4th course, a dish appears that isn't on any plan discussed beforehand, something the chef simply felt like making because of something you said an hour ago. A gesture with no line item and no explanation required. There's no bill because the arrangement was settled before you sat down, quietly, elsewhere, so that nothing interrupts the evening itself. You realize somewhere around that 4th course that you have stopped thinking about money entirely, not because you forgot it existed, but because it was designed to be invisible. The 8th rule. At this level, the meal was never the product. Your attention was the only thing being served, and it was served flawlessly. Somewhere right now, someone is standing under fluorescent light, ordering the same $6 meal they always order, correcting a cashier who already stopped listening. Their receipt prints before they reach for their wallet. Nobody remembers them from last week. They eat in their car with the radio on, watching the next car pull up before they've even left the lot. They don't know yet that 8 levels up, a chef is memorizing someone else's allergies from a conversation that happened months ago, treating memory itself like the finest ingredient on the menu. They think this is about the food. It never was. It's about how much of you a room is willing to notice, and whether that noticing scales with the number on the receipt or exists in spite of it. You are the same person at every table. The hunger is the same. The appetite for being seen is the same. The restaurant just decides how much of you it's willing to see based on what's printed at the bottom of the check.